Peering through the trees on Highway 40 in rural southwestern Michigan, roughly 100 miles northeast of Chicago, we can see a modest two-story frame house, except it's not an ordinary house. This is the Allegan monitoring station, one of many FCC listening posts that are used for monitoring all areas of the radio spectrum for various government and civilian organisations. This remote location was chosen because it has good ground conductivity and is electromagnetically quiet. The monitoring post was moved to Allegan from the Great Lakes Naval Base on the north side of Chicago in 1941. Allegan was built in the early days of World War II. Its original purpose was to detect and locate radio transmitters involved in suspected espionage activities. At that time, the site was completely fenced and had 2 military guards, one at the gate and one at the front door. In addition to monitoring duties, Allegan was home to the National Training Centre for FCC field staff. At the heart of the Allegan monitoring post was a circularly disposed antenna array. This antenna consisted of 60 elements in a 450-foot circle and a goniometer building in the centre. It was capable of determining the direction of an incoming signal within 6 degrees on any frequency from 300 kHz to 40 MHz. The design was similar to the famous Wullenweber DF array used by the military. It was designed by Art Ludker of the FCC's Powder Springs, Georgia Construction and Installation Branch and built entirely in-house. Despite its narrow beam width, Ludker's antenna had no gain. Something is in place on the old Wullenweber site today. Is it a CDAA? I'm not sure. It certainly doesn't look like it. Now, I'm sure by now you know where I'm going here. Another Wullenweber circularly disposed antenna array tour. Today's target, all of the FCC's arrays. Moving on to Waterville Road in Belfast, Maine now, and another monitoring station in a rural setting. This one is located just over 4 miles northeast of the town of Belfast and has the remains of a Wullenweber circle to the back of the property. We're 2 sites in and I already have 2 questions for you. Firstly, I keep reading that these monitoring stations closed in 1996, but other sources say they're still open. I wonder if they closed as manned stations but are still used as remote monitoring posts. It certainly looks that way. Secondly, I've found no pictures whatsoever of the Belfast station, and other stations we'll come to in this video, so if anybody has any, I'd love to see. Next we head over to an FCC remote monitoring post located in Canandaigua, New York, about 20 miles southeast of Rochester. It was actually shut down in 1978, but with the development of remote control capabilities in the 1990s, the FCC reactivated the HFDF system at the site. Canandaigua had a rotating Adcock HFDF antenna in the 1960s. This was replaced by a Wullenweber in the 1970s, shortly before the decision was made to phase out the HF monitoring capability at the site. The FCC Wullenweber antennas were smaller than the military elephant cages we've covered in previous videos, and consisted of vertical elements about 20 feet high around the perimeter of the circle. Today there's definitely some sort of antenna system on the site, indicating that it's still in use. McNeil, Arizona now, and the San Bernardino National Wildlife Refuge Admin Building and Visitors Contact Station. This is the location of the former Douglas, Arizona monitoring station. The site appears to be closed or at least scaled back, as I can't find much evidence for it in modern times, although there's a couple of poles within the circle. I also found no photos. I did, however, find an interesting snippet from the early 1990s. Donald R. Lato, WA7WOC of Carefree, Arizona, paid a $750 fine for willfully and maliciously interfering with amateur radio communications in early 1990 after being traced by the Douglas station. Loomis Trail Road in Ferndale, Washington reveals what looks like another functional FCC site. Like many of these, I couldn't find any photos, so if you have any, I'd love to see them. North of the buildings is a Wullenweber circle that has been repurposed for a different kind of antenna system. Moving on to Grand Island, Nebraska now, and we see hundreds of centre pivot irrigation circles in the ground, but looking closer, we can see the circle left by the FCC Wullenweber array. Built in 1927, the station was 6 miles west of Grand Island. It was deemed necessary that the station should be several miles from any centre of population in order to get away from man-made static. Today the site is used by Task Force, a US government office, and the Wullenweber circle is still home to some sort of antenna array. Next on our alphabetical list would be Kenai in Alaska, but I can't find any evidence of a CDAA at that site. So we continue to Kingsville, Texas, and the aptly named FCC Monitoring Road. The monitoring station is still in use, and the former Wullenweber circle has an antenna array in place similar to other sites we've looked at today. Oakland Mills Road near Laurel, Maryland now, and an FCC site that's definitely still in use. The fields to the rear are bristling with antennas, but the Wullenweber site definitely looks decommissioned. The location near Laurel was selected for its close proximity to Washington DC and Baltimore, as well as its good soils for earthing. At the time the FCC acquired the property, the farmhouse, a corn crib, a bank barn, and a privy were present. The Radio Intelligence Division's Foreign Broadcast Monitoring Service planned to use the farmhouse for their operations and moved into the first floor in March 1941. The farmhouse was described at the time as being banked with efficient apparatus. The walls were described as being lined with panel boards with a mystifying array of dials, knobs, wheels and switches. A directional antenna, since demolished, fixed atop a wood control shack, was constructed behind the farmhouse, which consisted of 2 metal poles with wires running horizontally between the posts at the centre, creating an H configuration. The station was also given a few mobile monitoring units, which were Hudson automobiles outfitted with a receiver and a loop direction finder. After the FCC field offices closed down all over the country in June 1996, complaints of interference were handled by a toll-free number that was answered in the Laurel monitoring station. Our next stop on this short tour is Lorraine Street in Livermore, California, and another FCC station that still appears to be in use. The listening post sits on what was originally the World War II era grounds of May School Naval Outlying Landing Field. The FCC moved their monitoring post from San Leandro to this site sometime in the mid to late 1940s, and it's still operational, though now remotely controlled. The Wullenweber circle is still there and is filled with antennas, but I don't see any evidence of the original array, and reports say it was dismantled in the mid-1990s. Powder Springs in Georgia now, and another functioning FCC site on a road with a great name, Monitoring Station Road. While much of the equipment in the racks is commercial, the FCC's own Equipment Construction and Installation branch was headquartered here. The grounds of this site are bristling with antennas today, and the Circle SCAR that was home to the Wullenweber array for 200 kHz to 30 MHz is disappearing rapidly, unfortunately. This site at Santa Isabel, Puerto Rico is more elusive. I couldn't find much evidence of an FCC monitoring station here. The Wullenweber circle is still visible, and evidence suggests that it may have been remotely operated from the United States Federal Court for the District of Puerto Rico, 35 miles to the northeast. Over to Vero Beach, Florida, and a site that seems derelict today, but if we look to the western side of the compound, we see another form of Wullenweber circle filled with that similar modern antenna system. This is another site I can't find any photos for. Our next and final location would be Waipahu, Hawaii, but this is another site that doesn't appear to have ever had a Wullenweber array. So that's all the FCC HF direction finding circularly disposed antenna array sites used for monitoring the radio spectrum and pinpointing the location of a signal to a high degree of accuracy. Like 99% of the Wullenweber systems we've looked at, they've all been replaced with more modern technology. However, their circle scars remain.